I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Our focus this week is on a major health issue facing people throughout the nation, but we're going to focus locally on some discussion held recently and some plans being put in place, the opioid crisis. Joining me, we have Ashley Micklethwaite with One Joplin and Dan Pekarek with the Joplin Health Department. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
Yes.
This past, I guess it was October, we had a summit actually, a meeting here in Joplin. We had people get together and kind of bring this national problem closer to home. So I'm going to start off with kind of reviewing that and, why was there a decision made that, we have this thing we're seeing on the news, you see it in magazines, national coverage. Why do we need to focus on it here in Southwest Missouri?
Okay. Well, I'll jump on that one to start with. There was actually a request from the state health department to 9 of the population centers across the state of Missouri, and they were asked to take on this issue, and part of that doing that was to support and promote a local conference, a local summit, if you will, on the issue, to try to kind of get that conversation started in the communities. You may recall that when Governor Greitens was running for office, this was one of his issues that he talked quite a bit about. So it's an issue from the governor's office to the cabinet level departments, and then now it's coming down to these population centers across the state, and to really just kind of start that conversation around the issue.
Of course, you as Joplin Health Department Director, your department is very involved in public health issues.
Sure.
To explain for our audience when we say One Joplin, how that ties into this for us.
Well, part of what One Joplin does is look at very large issues such as health, poverty, domestic violence, human services, and child abuse and neglect. And so when our health department was charged with looking at this very big health issue, Dan felt very comfortable. The health department is a key partner in One Joplin, and asked if One Joplin would help with the summit, and we were very, very happy to do so.
So it's kind of a natural partnership there, working together.
Right. Those partnerships have been in place for a long time, and it just, like I said, when I got the call, first phone call I made was to Ashley at One Joplin, said I need some help. So.
Right. Well, let's backtrack for people. When we say opioids, some people might be saying, I've heard the term, but what are we talking about? We know it's a drug, but how do you define? Somebody said, well, what's an opioid? How do we define that for people?
Well, opioids, natural opioids are derived from the poppy plant. And so most people have been exposed to opioids because they've had an injury, a serious injury, and their physician has prescribed them some form of pain reliever.
So it's a pain-killing type drug.
It's a pain-killing type drug. It alleviates pain, and it's really good at it.
So that's what's led to the problems. It's almost too good for many people.
It's good at alleviating pain, and it's highly addictive. So there's prescription opioids like OxyContin, oxycodone, Percocet, Vicodin. Those are kind of the major ones. There's also prescription, very heavy-duty pain relievers they often use for people who have cancer, like fentanyl,
Going through treatment,
morphine. And then there's what we call street opioids, like heroin.
So those illegal drugs fall into the same sort of category.
Right. They're all opioids.
So we've developed this point of crisis, and I know people catch the news, but let's talk about when we determine an opioid crisis. What has led to that, or what are maybe some statistics or examples when we say this is getting out of hand, nationwide or locally?
Well, Ashley's got all the statistics on this.
Okay.
Well, one of the statistics that I read that was just shocking to me is that in 2016, more people died of opioid overdose deaths than died in the Vietnam War, the Iraqi War, and the Afghanistan War, all put together in 1 year.
These are overdose deaths.
Overdose deaths, yes. And there's certain parts of the country that are real hot spots for that. And they're not your typical urban areas. West Virginia has been hit really, really hard by it. and it hits all socioeconomic classes as well. And what you can see on a map is it is getting closer and closer and closer to Missouri. And within Missouri, it's getting closer and closer and closer to Joplin and Southwest Missouri.
I know you have a website that, as we talk, you can look at some of this information. You have some graphics that kind of show the impact of it, and we can kind of look at the One Joplin. This is where you're actually putting some information out for people to visually see some of these situations.
Absolutely. There's information under the impact part of the website. Right now what's up is the outcomes of the opioid summit, but if you go to the impact section.
Let's backtrack to the top and go back to the drop down for the impact. Yeah, so yeah, okay.
There you go. And if you scroll down there, there's a couple of videos, but if you actually click on any of these graphs, it will actually give you more information.
So there's the state of Missouri you were talking about.
There's the state of Missouri, and that's hospitalizations due to overdose. And you can see there's a lot of dark purple there in Southwest Missouri.
I think one of the statistics that we heard was that there were almost 1,900 ER visits in the last 4 years, just from I think it was just not the Southwest Missouri counties, excluding the Springfield-Greene County metropolitan area. So primarily the Joplin metro area, there were over 1,900 ER visits alone
due to the
in the last 4 years.
And when you look at a map, you think, well, it's just going to be the big cities. We're small town, but small town problems are the same as the big city problems.
Yes, they do.
And tie
Yes,
that
they do.
together. So that then, I imagine, then trickles over that you're having people visit the emergency rooms with overdoses. That taxes the medical facilities and the people who are treating them.
And you know, that's one of the conversations that I had with the ER doctors over the last few years. I've heard this so many times from them that you know, they just see this all the time on a Friday or a Saturday evening. You know, they see people that are doctor shopping. You know, that people who have become addicted and then go to the ERs and use that as a location to try to get another prescription filled. And they literally might go from one ER to another ER to another ER to try to find a way to get another prescription filled.
And something like pain, it's hard. I mean, if you have a broken bone, you're going to see it on an x-ray. But how does a doctor assess, yes, you are indeed in pain, you need medication?
Right.
That's right. And it's challenging because 15 years ago, doctors were challenged and said, from a federal level, you are not adequately treating pain. And that is a vital sign you should be treating. And so they began treating pain, aggressively treating pain.
Doing much more medication than they used to, yeah.
Right. And so it created another problem because the pain, how they were treating pain was very good. It was very adequate, but it was also very addictive.
So a lot of people are getting on the pain pills. It's hard to stop them.
Absolutely. As Ashley said, these are very addictive. You know, that'll be one of the challenges, I think, for the community as we go forward. Every community is really to have this discussion about the proper use of opioids. There are proper uses for the prescription opioids. There are, as Ashley said, there are individuals who will have surgeries or what have you, and will have the need to have the opioid prescription. But I think that's going to be part of our message going forward is how do we safely use these, using them only to the amount that they absolutely have to be used, only you know, changing the prescription guidelines for physicians, you know, instead of maybe a 30-day supply, maybe something less than that. So there's a lot of things, you know, a lot of things in motion here that we'll have to look at, but certainly the prescribing habits and what's an appropriate amount to be prescribed, and then how to safely use them when you bring them home.
Now you mentioned people, as you said, shopping around for being able to get that prescription. If they can't get it legally through a doctor, I mean, are we seeing more instances of the crime? You know, I mentioned law enforcement has a concern that people are going to find illegal ways to find these drugs.
Yes, they do. And prescription opioids, there's a feel that, oh, if it was prescribed, then it's safe. And 70% of people who are abusing opioids are getting it from friends and family.
So you have some leftover drugs, they share it with somebody, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get a 30-day supply of a pain reliever because you had a bad back injury, and you only took 7 days worth, and it sits in your cabinet.
So
It
somebody's-
might not be in your cabinet anymore. So that's a concern. The other concern is when people start on prescription opioids and then shift to street opioids like heroin because of the expense. Heroin is cheaper than prescriptions on the street. And now people are using fentanyl.
Yeah.
And fentanyl is, what is it, 50 times
No, it can, depending on the strength, yeah.
more potent than morphine. And it can kill you.
So it's not just it's going to impair you; it's going to have fatal consequences if people
Fatal
take it.
consequences,
All right,
yes.
putting that together. Now you mentioned it goes across all demographics as well. So
Yes, it does.
It's not necessarily older people, younger people, people of all different ages.
All different ages, all different socioeconomic backgrounds. One of the most touching things that we had in our summit is we had 3 people give testimonials. And one of the women who gave a testimonial was 14 when she started using opioids, and it's upper middle class family, loving parents, and it started with a sport injury.
Got hurt, the doctor gave a prescription, and she stayed on that type of painkiller.
Yeah, and it led to heroin.
Now, do you find that we hear a lot about concerns about young people, schools, and so forth? That are there more youth maybe looking for those types of drugs versus the old days of illegal drug trading to start off? You know, I mean, is there a way to stereotype that, or say that there's more temptation maybe for the teens to say, I'm going to start off by trying these drugs?
Well, I don't know that we saw any statistics specific to that issue, but certainly we heard conversation in the summit, and we've heard conversation in other avenues that if those prescription drugs are in the household, if they're in the kitchen cabinet, and they're there, it certainly can be an easy avenue for a teenager, for instance, or even younger, someone who just wants to experiment and thinking, I want to try this. It's just an easy avenue for them to get their hands on it. There's nothing. They don't have to go out and buy something illegally. They don't have to go out and do something that's considered dangerous. It's right there in the kitchen cabinet, or it's in the bathroom cabinet or something. So it's just by the sheer availability of it, I think, can lead to that experimentation.
So overall, there's a lot of availability for medications for people to get into and
Yes,
get
there
involved
are.
with and tying
Yeah.
that together. Now, I know at the summit you had a lot of people representing different fields. I mentioned law enforcement, you had healthcare. Tell me about some of the other participants that you had there.
We had citizens who are just concerned. We had educators, people from our school districts in Southwest Missouri.
We had the FDA, not the FDA, the DEA had a
Yes.
speaker that was a very informative speaker about from the criminal side of it, that the heroin use and things of that nature. They spoke a lot about that. Gosh, we had, just like Ashley said, just a whole host of individuals
Wide
from variety of entities.
And now you had some interaction there as well, and I know on your website you also have a post that earlier but talks about results. And was this an
Yes.
opportunity to hear from the people participating there?
Absolutely. We did something that both engaged people who came as well as supplied great information. So we asked people when they registered for information, but then at the actual summit, we did live polling where they could text an answer to a question that we posed. So one of the very first questions we asked was with regards to how many people at that conference knew somebody who had an opioid use problem.
Okay, so just the knowledge of somebody who has the problem.
Yeah,
So
do you know? And the majority, you can see there on that graph in blue, the majority of people at this conference had somebody in their circle of friends or family that already had a substance use disorder problem.
So this shows the impact just among this gathering of people who are concerned to find out more about it.
That's right.
Put that together.
That's right.
So you were able to take this information and then address the audience, and where are we going to go from here now that we know we have these problems? So
Yes.
kind of establish the problem, leading down the road to the solution and what we can do with that.
Yes.
Well, and that's really probably one of the prime directions from the conference, or even going into the conference. We really wanted to, like I say, kind of start that conversation in the community. Part of that, by starting that conversation, we started that at the summit. We wanted to hear from people, what kind of ideas do you think are things we might be able to do in our community in the future, after hearing from some of the speakers and hearing from some of the experts in the field. What are some of the things that we might think might want to do in the community that can help with this issue? And so those kinds of things are going to be put together in a final report that we're working on eventually. But some of those things are the things like we've already kind of talked a little bit about. Do you have a drug court in your community? We're fortunate enough to have that in Jasper County already, but many communities don't have that. That's an idea of one. The prescription drug take-back days, or the availability of prescription drug drop-off containers. We have those in the community, and so we're kind of ahead of the game there. The prescription drug monitoring program, the ordinances that were just passed in Joplin and Jasper County, that's another example of something that you heard from the speakers. That's an important piece of this puzzle of addressing this issue in the community. So those are some examples of the kinds of things that we can look to do in our communities locally. And but getting certainly a big component is going to be community education. We heard about Generation RX, a program that is really geared around educating the community about the proper use of opioids when you are prescribed them. How do you properly use them? Take only what you need to take. Don't take what you don't need to take, and properly dispose of them when you're finished with them. So it's a whole very interesting community education program, kind of around the proper usage of opioids.
You mentioned the disposal, and I think it's just been probably within the last few years we've heard of, don't flush things down the toilet. What do you do when you have those leftover medications? And we do know there are places to dispose of them, or we have these drug take-back days. Is that, you feel, a helpful approach that, so a lot of times you don't need that whole bottle of medication after an accident or something.
Right, and I encourage everyone, go and look in your medicine cabinet or wherever you keep your prescription drugs. My guess is there are old meds in there. And you can certainly take them to a drug take-back day, drop-off point. Joplin Police Department has a drop-off box at the police department. But there's also disposable bags that are activated charcoal, where you can put your drugs in there with activated charcoal and some water, and then dispose of them, and it's safe for the environment, and nobody can misuse them
It's not
either.
going to damage, it's not going to go through a landfill and cause any problems or anything like that people avoid.
And those are available.
And a lot of people may not remember that they have pills in there, like you say. I 2 years ago broke a toe, but I don't remember if they still have a bottle of leftover painkillers. People say things like that,
Right. And the other thing that I would ask people to do is, if they have family members who are elderly, help them go through their medicine cabinets too.
And speaking of the elderly, a lot of times elderly have lots of prescriptions. I know you visit grandma and they've got the little daily pill taker, and there's 6 or 7 different pills they're taking every day. The doctor changes those and they say, what do I do with these ones I don't need anymore?
Right. And we don't want our elderly population being vulnerable because they have a lot of prescription drugs in their home that they're not using anymore. And if they're opioids, that could make them a target.
So that's where we get into the crime situation, where people specifically might break into a house looking for drugs and things?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we certainly heard that from the police department, especially I think the DEA agent was talking about. Again, it's not so much right here in Joplin right now. When you talk to the Joplin police chief, we don't have a serious heroin problem right now in this community, but it's coming our way.
Right.
And interestingly, I think one of the statistics was 75% of heroin users started with opioids, and so it's something that they they can be familiar with. And so if they're looking for something, and they're willing to do something illegal, that's, as Ashley said, it might be an easy target for them to look at a household to steal the opioids that are remaining.
And you mentioned heroin. I know if you look at stories like from the St. Louis area, I've seen stories about the heroin crisis up there, and it's, as you say, it could be upper middle class or upper class children in the homes. The parents, they're abusing them. The parents don't know.
Absolutely, and I think it's very important. Substance use disorder is one of the most misunderstood and stigmatized disorders that we have. And what we need to do is be helpful and non-judgmental and realize these people need help. And we need to protect our kids and our elderly and make sure that we use and dispose of our prescription drugs appropriately. And then on the other end, help people who need treatment.
So that brings up the treatment question. If somebody has become addicted, what are the options? It's tough to break that cycle or that process.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So programs in place through drug withdrawal, how do you go through those types of treatments?
Yes, well, opioid withdrawal will not kill you, but it is one of the most difficult withdrawals you will go through. And locally, Ozark Center has an inpatient
Treatment facility.
And then there's other treatment facilities like Ascent that do long-term recovery. There's other support groups. Narcotics Anonymous is active. And there's also a methadone clinic. I know there's a lot of stigma with methadone clinics, but it is a best practice. Drug replacement therapy is considered one of the best ways to get off illegal drugs.
So there's a lot of different steps people can take. That awareness of what those are is probably one of the processes you're trying to let people know.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, as Ashley said, we need to be supportive of those individuals that are having the issue, are having the problem. And part of that community education has to be around that issue. It's not just, cleaning out, properly use them and so forth, but if you do know of someone who has an issue, being supportive and being helpful to them and getting to the right treatment facilities, right services in the community. So, and just really educating the community about the availability of those services.
So you see an increasing need in communities for treatment facilities in the future as well, or those types of programs?
Yes, there is, period. And I think it's important also not to talk about those people needing treatment, because those people could be your daughter or son, your mom, your grandmother. Those people are in your
society.
circle of friends and family.
Yeah,
So,
when you saw that graphic that showed a huge percentage of the individuals that attended the summit, the vast majority of them had a close contact that had an issue. So it's those people are us.
Right. They're people that you see every day. You work with your
Yeah.
family members, your front neighbors, and tying that together
Yeah.
and so forth. So by approaching this, the state of Missouri obviously is taking a lead and wanting to look at what we can do for it, the government also as well. Do you feel that from healthcare providers and community health issues, it's an issue that's really, it's time to really need to tackle head on? Something that's...
now is the time. Joplin is in a unique position that we are not a hot spot on the map yet. We are pretty much surrounded by it. And so if we do some things right now, I think we can help prevent it getting so bad. So prescription drug monitoring program, letting our doctors know who has drugs, what kind of drugs, how many drugs is just key. Getting that information into our providers' hands is very important.
And Dan, tell me a little bit about that. You mentioned the prescription drug monitoring program that Joplin and Jasper County have started. People might say, what's involved with that? Give me some of the minor details.
Well, it's a program that was started in St. Louis area earlier this year. And they drafted an ordinance in the lack of a state ordinance, a state law the state of Missouri was unsuccessful in passing again last year. the St. Louis area kind of took this upon themselves to draft an ordinance that would address that issue, that would create one of these, a prescription drug monitoring program in their community, in their area. And they drafted it in a way that it could be expanded and adopted in other areas of the state. So they started promoting this to other areas of the state, saying, would you like to sign up with this? And so both Joplin and Jasper County looked at the ordinance that they were promoting and decided that we thought it would be appropriate for our area. Essentially, with a PDMP, as a prescription is being filled for an opioid, the pharmacist will enter that information into a protected database, a secure database, and then in the future, then when physicians, if somebody shows up in a physician's office or in the ER on Saturday night at 10:30 at night, and they're saying, oh gosh, I have this pain and I really need something for it. They would conceivably be able to look up that individual and see their prescription history, so they could make a better decision about whether or not they need to stop.
You just recently got one the other day.
Golly,
why do you need one now?
Just a week ago, you got a 30-day supply, and why are you needing another 30-day supply? So it's a tool that is given to the physicians so that they can make a better judgment about whether or not they should or should not prescribe another opioid, or whether they need to just stop at that point and say, hey, we need to sit down and have a conversation. You know, something's going on here. It may be that it's entirely appropriate, that but it could even be something where they see. You mentioned, we talked about elderly earlier. It could be a situation where somebody that doesn't even realize that they've got another prescription that could conflict with this one. So this will give them the ability, those physicians the ability, a tool that they can use to help them make a decision about whether or not they think this is an appropriate prescription to fill, to write.
So really helping with communication and getting people on the same street, basically, talking about things.
Yes, absolutely.
Right now, we're still a few months out. It takes about a 3-month process to get all of the paperwork done and everything. Right now, we're thinking that it's probably somewhere around February 1st, the beginning of February for a go live in our area. We're still kind of working on those details, but right now it's sometime around that time.
Great. Well, if somebody who's watching has information, they can go to your website. Are there questions for looking for more information?
Yes, One Joplin's website, if you go to the upper right-hand corner, there's a link that says opioid crisis. If you click on that, you can see information that was gathered at the summit, all of the videos, all of the PowerPoints that were shown. You can go to opioid impact, find out more about the impact of the opioid crisis in the United States and in Missouri. And if you go to the PDMP link, you can learn more about what is a prescription drug monitoring program.
So a lot of educational material there ready to go.
There, it's all right there.
Well, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us on the program, providing some information for our viewers today.
Certainly.
And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.